One gunshot in Sarajevo triggered the deadliest war the world had ever seen. But what if it never happened? How different would our world look today? World War I killed over 20 million people, wounded another 20 million, collapsed empires, and set the stage for World War II. It reshaped borders, destroyed generations, and created the modern world as we know it. Without it, history could have taken a shockingly different turn. Today, we will explore how a world without the Great War might have reshaped politics, technology, and even your daily life. In our real timeline, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 set off a chain reaction of alliances. Austro-Hungary moved against Serbia. Russia mobilized to defend its ally. Germany backed Austria-Hungary. France stood by Russia. And Britain joined in when Belgium was invaded. Within weeks, Europe descended into total war. Trench warfare, machine guns, poison gas, and mass mobilization dragged the world into 4 years of destruction. By 1918, the Treaty of Versailles humiliated Germany. The Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires collapsed, and the world entered an age of chaos. But imagine the bullet never fired. The assassin misses, or perhaps the Archduke's driver does not take the wrong turn that placed the royal couple the path of Gavrilo Princip. Without the assassination, there is no spark to ignite the powder keg of alliances. Europe remains tense, but the catastrophic war is postponed, or perhaps avoided entirely. Austria-Hungary survives as a great power. The continent continues its uneasy peace. Even the deadly influenza pandemic that killed millions in 1918 might have spread far less without mass armies moving across continents and into the trenches. In this alternate timeline, Germany remains a strong industrial empire, undefeated and ambitious. It continues competing with Britain at sea and with France on the continent. But without the devastation of war, its population and economy continue to grow. By the 1930s, Germany may well outpace Britain and France combined. Instead of being crushed, Germany becomes the engine of European progress. Without the Great War, Adolf Hitler never rises to power. In our reality, he was a failed artist who found purpose in the trenches, then capitalized on Germany's humiliation at Versailles. In a world without that humiliation, Hitler likely dies in obscurity, remembered by no one. Without him, fascism may never gain its deadly foothold in Europe. The Holocaust never happens. 6 million Jews survive, along with countless Romani, Slavic, and disabled people who were victims of Nazi ideology. European culture is richer and more diverse. Science and technology benefit from brilliant minds, who in our timeline were silenced. Thinkers, writers, and inventors who never had the chance to live might transform this alternate 20th century. The Russian Revolution may never succeed. In our reality, the pressures of total war broke the Russian Empire. Millions of deaths, starvation, and the incompetence of the Tsar pushed the population into revolt. Without the war, the Romanovs might have held on, reforming slowly or cling to autocracy for decades longer. No Lenin, no Bolshevik takeover, and no Soviet Union. That means no Cold War, no nuclear arms race, no Berlin Wall, and no communist revolutions spreading across Asia and Latin America. Russia might instead evolve into a constitutional monarchy similar to Britain, or perhaps a slow-moving parliamentary democracy. Alternatively, it could remain an old-fashioned empire, resisting change until the very end. Either way, the ideological struggle that defined the second half of the 20th century never happens. Colonial empires hold on much longer, The First World War drained Britain and France, forcing them to rely on colonial troops and weakening their grip overseas. After the war, nationalist movements surged, leading to independence struggles across India, Africa, and the Middle East. But without the war, Britain, France, and even Austro-Hungary continue to dominate vast territories. Decolonization is delayed by decades. India may still be under British control well into the late 20th century. African independence movements may not gain ground until much later. The modern world map with dozens of independent nations might never exist. The Ottoman Empire, too, would linger on. In our world, the Ottomans collapsed in the wake of defeat, paving the way for modern Turkey and reshaping the Middle East. Without the war, the Ottoman Empire might survive into the 1930s or 40s, delaying or preventing the creation of countries like Iraq, Syria, and Israel. The borders of the Middle East would be radically different, and the conflicts we know today might never arise in the same way. A stronger Ottoman state might modernize and reform, or it might cling to its fading traditions, but it would remain a player on the world stage. Technology also changes dramatically. Many of the innovations we associate with the 20th century were accelerated by war. Tanks, fighter planes, chemical weapons, radio communication, and even advances in medicine, plastic surgery and blood transfusion, all came from the desperate needs of the battlefield. Without the Great War, these technologies arrived much later. The world of 1940 still looked like the world of 1910. Aircraft remain fragile, cars remain luxury items, and medicine advances more slowly. The jet age, the space race, and even nuclear power might all be delayed by decades. But not every consequence is negative. Without the war, millions of young men survived to raise families, build businesses, and contribute to society. The cultural lost generation of writers and artists is not lost. Europe avoids the trauma that scarred an entire continent. Perhaps the world becomes more stable, less cynical, and more prosperous. There are other ripple effects too. Without the Great War, the United States may never rise as a global superpower. In our timeline, America entered World War I in 1917 and emerged as a major player on the world stage. The war shifted economic power from Europe to the United States, paving the way for American dominance in the 20th century. Without that shift, the US remains strong, but it competes with the still mighty European empires. Instead of one global superpower, the world remains divided among several great empires, none of them able to dominate completely. International organizations like the League of Nations and the United Nations may never form. Without a catastrophic war to highlight the need for cooperation, global diplomacy evolves more slowly. The idea of collective security, international law, and human rights may not gain traction until much later. Even culture and society evolve differently. The war disrupted class systems, gave women greater roles in the workforce, and accelerated movements for suffrage and equality. Without that disruption, social progress might slow. Women may not gain the right to vote until decades later. The rigid class structures of European society endure much longer. A world without the Great War may be more stable, but it could also be more conservative and less progressive. By the 21st century, the world looks utterly different. Europe is still dominated by monarchies. The Austro-Hungarian Empire sits at the heart of the continent. Germany is a powerful industrial empire without the stain of fascism. Russia is still ruled by the Tsars, and communism may never become a global force. The British Empire still rules India. Africa is still carved up by European powers. The Middle East remains under Ottoman control. The United States is influential, but it does not stand alone as a superpower. The balance of power is frozen in an imperial age, not a democratic one. In this alternate 21st century, global politics may be defined not by ideological struggles, like capitalism versus communism, but by imperial rivalries much like the 19th century. Europe's great powers still compete for colonies and influence. Instead of NATO and the Warsaw Pact, we might have new versions of imperial alliances. Instead of the Cold War, we might have a never-ending balance of power game, with empires constantly maneuvering but never daring to risk full-scale war. So that is one vision of a world where World War I never happened. No Hitler. No Soviet Union. Colonial empires stretching far longer. A slower pace of technology. A more conservative society. And a world where the balance of power might look utterly alien to us today. But what do you think would have happened? Would the world be better without the Great War? Or would something even worse have taken its place? Share your version in the comments, and I will feature the best answers in part 2. And speaking of part 2, next time we will ask the question, what if Hitler won World War II? Subscribe so you don't miss it.